Hello, welcome back to the Windsurfer magazine channel. You've got myself and Tris in the studio today, and as you can see right next to us, we have got the all-new Severne Stone. This one is the 88 litre model. So the Stone originated obviously from Jaeger Stone and Mark Stone from making their Asymmetrical board, which came out in 2022. So it's a little bit, perhaps the sort of one side of the spectrum. It's very sort of pointed at one sort of certain style of riding. Obviously, if it's asymmetrical, it's kind of working on a starboard tack wave. Now they've sort of refined it and put it back into a symmetrical shape. This one comes in 9 different sizes, so from 60 litres all the way up to 112, so it's quite a big range there. This one is 228 centimetres long, 58 centimetres wide, so a little bit narrower than the other boards that we have on test, but once we get on the water, I'm sure there'll be a reason for that. Severne do state this one weighs 5.8 kilograms. We've weighed it, and actually it came in at 5.7 kilograms, so a touch under, but you know, there's tolerances in there. So actually it's not the end of the world. I'm going to pass you over to Tris now, and he's going to talk you through the brand claims from Severne.
So Jaeger Stone, obviously he's kind of one of those guys you love to watch, like on YouTube channels and all the rest of it. Like everything that comes out of his on the YouTube channel, he's quite a sight to behold. So I suppose the board itself, really, when it comes down to it, is designed by him and developed by his dad, Mark Stone. And it's designed to be a real world waveboard, and it is quite an attractive looking thing. I mean, the colour straight away, the fluoro stands out really well, but the actual design itself, there's quite a few people straight away, as soon as they saw it, they're like, oh, okay, this is quite an attractive thing. So a real world waveboard, designed to be fast, fluid and fun in real world conditions, particularly excelling in downwind conditions, down the line conditions. But basically the whole thing is it's producing enough speed and release to be kind of applicable in onshore and average conditions as well. I mean, first sight, what were your thoughts when you saw it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard board not to look at and think, wow, that's pretty radical. So it's kind of got, from my sort of first views, where it's kind of a little bit of an older school design, so it's quite a tucked in nose, quite narrow and pointy, and again to the sort of like drawn in pintail design, which sort of you haven't really seen so much, I would say, in the past few years. Everyone's got that sort of like squash sort of swallowtail. This one's a little bit more drawn out, which is quite nice to see. It's a little bit of a refreshing look in that, and the pintail for me they just look really cool. Visibly, so
yeah,
again,
it's kind of a traditional feel, isn't it?
Yeah.
It looks, and what's really nice actually is that they've done their own thing. Like you were saying, there's been a tradition like where people are trying to make everything more compact, etc., etc. But actually, this has got loads of curvature in its outline. So pulled in nose, like that sort of rounded pintail, but loads of dome in the deck. And actually, the rails are really tapered down, aren't they?
Yeah, it's definitely a different sort of design to what we're sort of used to seeing. So if we're looking at the board actually on the underside and what we've got going on beneath the board, it's starting with sort of a monoconcave in the nose. And it's quite a gentle sort of transition down through the board. So it starts with the mono, it then goes to a very slight double.
Yeah, so right by the front.
Right by the foot strap, that's when it starts to come in. As it sort of progresses down towards your back, underneath your back foot, there's a slight wash of V coming in, sort of running out all the way through the tail. So it's quite a simple design underneath, but yet again, you look at other boards, some of them are a little bit more on the upper side of the spectrum, and some again have very minimal touches. But again, when you look at a rider like Jaeger and obviously working closely with his dad on the board, there's obviously a reason for that. It's a down the line board, so that's what's working for those guys out in Oz and hopefully down here on the south coast.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, just again comparing it to some of the other boards that we have in test here, the stance and the position of the rider is pushed a little further forward. Yeah. So rather than right out at the tail of the board, it's actually a little further forward, and it's just kind of, it's quite nice to think that they've gone their own way. They're not kind of doing what's traditionally or what's the sort of the latest trend. They're kind of following what that sits and what works for them. So so that side was really interesting, and actually the 1 foot off is narrower than a lot of other boards nowadays. So it's pulled into 1 foot off was 37 centimeters, so definitely narrower than some of the others we have.
Which is super interesting, but again, it's an exciting looking board, so I guess at the end of the day you've got to see what it's like on the water. So just running over a couple of extra little bits we can see on the board. Obviously they've got the Gore-Tex vent screw, so no need to screw your sort of standard one in. Relatively standard length mast track. Again, sort of positioned relatively sort of standard
nice
nowadays.
Little indicators in there for positioning.
Cool, and then we look at the foot straps. Severne have a single screw insert. Some brands we've got on test have double inserts, so it'd be interesting to see whether there's a massive difference in that. Obviously Severne have quite lightweight straps anyway, so there might not need to be the extra reinforcement, and I'm sure the guys would have tested that actually when they're in the prototyping stages of the board. So we've got that, and obviously a thing that Severne have on all their boards, they have the Hex 4 screws, so it's the same again on this board. The foot straps are on Hex 4 and the fins. Obviously this one coming as a quad as standard, but you have got the option with the 5 fin boxes to try it as a thruster. Yeah. So definitely something we'll look to get on the water and try with. Yeah. So if we take a look at the tech features, so what Severne have actually put into the board, their layup and whatnot. If you want to kick it off, Tris.
Yeah, so construction-wise, straight away, so it's got sort of premium carbon and S-class construction. So again, it's sort of using the premium materials that are available, so a lot of the brands are working on it, and that's probably why we've got the 5.7 kilos. Yeah. So it's super light, using really good quality materials. Like you said, it comes in quad or thruster, but it's actually supplied with quad setup, so the quad fins. So the fins themselves are Severne designed, and they're using some carbon infusion to produce them, which is basically a thermoplastic polymer with carbon fibers sort of integrated within it. Yeah. So they're quite flexy actually, aren't they? They've definitely got a little bit of...
definitely a lot different to what...
not stiff.
It's kind of that sort of flex characteristic you're seeing in like the yellow K4 fins, a little bit softer, whereas a lot of other brands that we've seen are, they're carbon fins, but they're quite stiff. Yeah. Obviously, hopefully, sort of from the feel of it, it's going to give a little bit of, sort of as you drive into the turn, it's got a little bit of leeway just to sort of response from the fins, exactly. So on this board, they've got their own sort of what they call sizing. So at the back, you've got two of their Wave 155s, and then at the front of the quad setup, you've got their Wave 95s.
Yeah, so 9.5 and then 15.5.
Exactly. So a little bit confusing to wrap your head around to start with, but it's one of those things you get settled into quite nicely. And obviously you've got the Severne signature camo pads, so quite high density pads, but they're nice and thick, nice and comfy. So again, little things like that are quite nice when you're sailing all day on the water. It wants to be nice and comfortable. And as we said, they've got the Hex 4 screws, keeping it consistent within their range. It's the same tool that you use for tightening up your battens on the Severne sails, and now all of the boards. So with that said, I think that wraps up sort of the whole features of the board and what it is. We're going to head on the water, and we will see you back in the studio soon. Okay, we're back. We've had a fair few sessions now on the Stone board. It's time for us to sort of give you guys an insight into what we thought, how it went. I think to start off, it looks like a pretty amazing board, and it certainly sort of portrays that once you're onto the water, which is a really nice feeling. I'll let Tris sort of explain a little bit more about the sort of feelings underfoot, and then we'll just elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think first and foremost, both of us felt, even though it actually feels a little bit smaller than 88 litres, I'd probably say that to start with. You get on it and it's really compact. It does feel a little bit smaller, but actually it's very balanced. So you can kind of, you float out in those really marginal conditions, particularly sort of, some of the places that we tested. You definitely have a little bit of a float and ride to start with before you kind of get to the wind line. And the board was smaller than some that still have the same quoted volume, but actually it floats in a really balanced, controlled way. The balance is definitely there. Once it actually gets the power and delivered to it, it accelerates really quickly, doesn't it? It kind of gets going very, very quickly, and it tracks upwind incredibly well. So from that respect, really impressed by it. I think probably the monoconcave at the front and the shoulders kind of, it gave it nice and balanced, great deal of balance and kind of release, and then when it actually is on the plane, it tracks really upwind really well, as I said, and actually is really fast.
Yeah, definitely. That's
that side of it.
Definitely a big point, positive from it. Like, the wind hits a sail, you go, and like even for stuff like jumping and whatnot, you're constantly powered up, so it wants to go, which is a nice feeling to have. Yeah. And I think, like Trish said, it does feel a little bit smaller than some of the other quoted boards we've got, but it's a little bit narrower, so it's 58 centimetres wide. Yeah. Some of the other boards are looking at sort of 59 and a half, so it's probably one of the reasons behind that, I'd say. Yeah,
and it kind of that narrowness in the tail as well was a little bit sort of noticeable as well. Yeah. But that said, once it's actually going, like we said, it's really planted. It gave you the confidence to really drive the power into it, and then actually turn it off the wind and hit the ramps and get some aerial time as well. Feels really, light underfoot, doesn't it?
Yeah, really, I think that's the biggest sort of takeaway from the board itself is the confidence and just, you're on the wave, you need to go for the top turn, the wave's broken a little bit late, you just can rely on it to hit that. It will stay really controlled underneath your feet, which for a lot of the conditions we've tested in over the past week or so, we've had a few days that were quite big and you just wanted something to rely on, which it really did. Actually,
and I think that side of it, being on the wave, that's where it like comes into its own. I mean, it feels like you can place the board actually anywhere you want it, and you have the confidence in the rails, so you have really like a load of connection. You can drive it really hard, or you can kind of traverse the wave a little bit more, but you can feel the rails the whole time.
Yeah, it just slices through any sort of wave you're chucking at it, and the smoother it got, the more the board felt like it just came into its own. You go into the bottom turn, you can really feel everything working, especially, as Trish said, the rails. And then when it comes to the top turn, you just cut back on yourself and it just forms a real nice sort of curve around the top section. Yeah. I mean, we have tested it in the quad for a majority of it. We need to try the thruster a little bit more. But as you guys will know, we've got a sort of, at the end of the test, we'll have this sort of full video coming out for that. So we'll try it again with that and sort of compare the notes. But overall, it's definitely a board that is sort of up there with the performance side of stuff, which...
Well, it's certainly eye-catching. You take it to the beach and straight away quite a few people are like, wow, that board looks the part. But it also acts the part in the water, really kind of impressed by it.
Which is nice, definitely.
You were saying a little bit with regards to kind of getting out over white waters, so those bigger days in K-Bay.
Yeah, so sort of the float and ride, it's definitely got enough volume, even though it feels a bit smaller as you're sort of floating. When it comes to punching over the white water, I did find it a little bit sticky and there wasn't a lot of volume in the nose.
Maybe a little bit narrower in the shoulders.
Yeah, definitely. And, it's not a massive negative. It just feels like, I mean, for me, I am 95 kilos, so probably the next size up would be a bit more beneficial. But I mean, an 88 for me is kind of my sort of drop down when it is windy, which we did have quite a lot of. Yeah. But that was the only sort of downside for me. So, if you're a bit bigger, it might be the fact of actually sizing up a little bit can do it, and you've got more than enough control on that board. And I'm sure in the bigger sizes in the range, it's still gonna excel in what it does well, which is really good. But yeah, overall, I think Severne and the guys, so Jaeger and his father Mark, they've put together a board that really is at one end of the spectrum of it just wants to rip up the waves, and you look at their riding and it's exactly what they're doing. Perhaps it's a little bit on that sort of performance side, a bit more than other boards we got in the all-round test, but having said that, it still does everything superbly
Still
well.
accessible, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. I think the only thing we can do now is we're going to wrap the video up. We're going to head up to Rossniger next week. The forecast looks good, and then any other sort of acknowledgements we get from the board, and when we try it in a thruster, we will put it in the overall video, which comes out sort of in a month's time or so. And then so any bits that we've missed or you want to know about, they will be in that video. So keep an eye out for that one. And with that, we will wrap up the video. We've got probably 4 or 5 more boards to get through, so they'll be coming out as and when. And so keep an eye on the channel, drop us a like, leave us a comment. So any good bits you like, any bits you still want, just let us know. Any kit you might be missing and you want to see that in the test, you know, drop it down below. Give us a subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.